Hey y'all, it's Kim again. So this is video two of the Biden and Robert Hur transcript. Phew. Anyway, we're gonna start right here. Up here, pretty much, Biden was just kind of starting off the interview, and he was talking about, I guess, writing a book during or after the time his son passed away. But whatever. We're going to start here with Mr. Hur. It says, one other thing we understand you spent significant time on, I think, towards the end of your vice presidency, as well as post vice presidency, was the Biden Cancer Initiative. President Biden, yes. Mr. Hur, also known as the Cancer Moonshot. So, can you tell us about your thinking in January 2017 about how much time that was going to take of yours in its relative priority to other things that you were working on, President Biden? It was high priority, and that's one of the reasons why I liked Penn as well. Penn has a great medical school and a great cancer research facility up there. And I talked with the president at Penn, and I talked to other people at the school, and Bo had engaged with them as well as a patient. Um, and so the great thing about Penn, it wasn't a straight line. I had access to a whole range of experts who could help me on the things, or I thought I could help. They thought I could be added value, and I think as well. But and the way that came about was in order to try to deal with what Bo was facing, I visited every major cancer research facility in the world with one exception, to interview and find out about what they knew about glioblastoma, what they knew about various, because I'm still convinced, I'm still working on the cancer initiative. So what I found was that cancer docs are incredible, but a lot of them walk by that mirror looking at themselves as a Pulitzer Prize of a Nobel Prize about to win. They don't share data and information very much. So under the Obama administration, he told me I could begin the research, see what we should be doing as an administration to deal with cancer. And what I did find out was there's very little collaboration, and even on projects where there's a lot of money the federal government puts out for research projects, and the deal is you're supposed to, once that project is finished, publish it. Well, the vast majority don't publish it for a long time, and they never publish their failures. No, look, when I say not their failure, when they reach the conclusion they were looking for, and you learn more from that as you learn everything else or anything else. So, one of mine and the president gave me carte blanche to engage any member of the administration. So, for example, we used to have meetings at NIH where there was all the medical. And what I did, I made sure that the Defense Department was there. I made sure that the NASA was there. NASA knows more about dealing with some of the things that have to do when working with that cancer. Many people die trying to, when they kill the cancer, they use a proton. Anyway, so there are all kinds of things. And I wanted the Defense Department in there because they had computers, a million billion calculations per second, and no medical facility had that. So I've tried to give every resource that I've learned. I'm no doctor. I've learned theoretically could be added value in determining what was the source of certain cancers and therefore cures. So that's how I got so deeply engaged in that. And Mr. Hurt understood. So let me shift gears here slightly. We've talked about the kinds of efforts and initiatives that you were thinking about spending time on after the end of your vice presidency. Could you tell us what you were thinking back at that time in January 2017 about where you plan to spend your time? So we understand that you rented a home on Chain Bridge Road in McLean, Virginia. unidentified male. Yeah, Mr. Hurt. You obviously still have the lake house in Wilmington. At that time, at some point, you acquired the home or beach home in Rehoboth. So there were a number of different places where you could lay your head after the end of your vice presidency. And how did you think about where you were going to be spending time? President Biden, well, I didn't think about the beach house because I didn't have the capacity to. For 36 years, I was listed as the poorest man in Congress. I mean, literally listed by that rating. And I did fine because I had my salary. So I never thought of it or that. I commuted every day. But the reason for Penn wanting me to have a facility in Washington was they wanted me to continue to engage with Congress and the Senate, presidency, and the administrations, each administration in debates about what the foreign policy issues were. And so they had often set up for me to be guest lecturers in Europe or wherever it was to continue to engage in the fundamental debates about the future of the foreign policy of the United States. President Biden, so that's why, and if you notice, the Penn Biden Center was as close as you get to the Capitol without being on the Capitol grounds. It had conference rooms and the like, so I could bring down people and they'd come down and debate issues like they do in other fora, like the Council on Foreign Relations. That was sort of the generic model, Mr. Hurt. And given that, was that I suppose, the reason for you to have a home in Washington, D.C. area? President Biden, yeah. Yes, because my wife was still teaching. In order for her to be able to continue to teach at Northern Virginia Community College, and rather than have her commute, and if I had gone back and located in Delaware permanently, I wouldn't have had the reach. I'd be traveling a lot down here and in other areas to not just engage American diplomats, but to engage foreign diplomats to come and talk about foreign policy. Mr. Hurt understood. President Biden, and with exposed students too. I mean, that was the whole idea here, expose the Penn students to these opportunities. Mr. Hurt, okay. Any other questions on that general overview? All right. I'd like to move on to the next topic, which generally is going to cover questions about your handling of classified information and materials during your vice presidency. And let me try to frame the following set of questions for you. We well understand that the president and the vice president in our system of government are the ultimate consumers of intelligence and classified information. And in order for you to properly do your constitutional duties, you have to have ready and convenient access to classified information. So part of the reason we've been talking to so many people during the course of our investigation is we're trying to get a better sense of how vice presidents and you in particular, when you were vice president, how you stored and accessed that information. Given that the handling rules, the classified handling rules that apply to every other human being in government don't necessarily apply to the president and vice president. Those two folks are different. All that being said, in the end, we have to write a report that explains how and why certain classified documents got to where they got. So part of why we're asking this next set of questions, and we've been talking to so many of the people we've talked to, is we are just trying to understand the paper flow of classified information. How does it get to a vice president? How did it get to then Vice President Biden? And then where did these documents go from there? So that's the reason, that's the relevance of this next set of questions of that whole topic to our investigation. So all that said, we hope that you can share this or share with us your recollections of how you handled or about how you handled classified and those paper flows and processes during the time that you were vice president. So we understand that due to the sheer volume of paper and the need to send material to archives after you're done with them, your papers were constantly being collected by members of your staff, and new materials were being provided to you. And part of the way that happened was that you received binders on a near daily basis. Sometimes they were unclassified binders, sometimes they were classified binders. And this is, I suppose, a more higher level, more general question. I could see how there might be a tension between, on the one hand, your staff being eager to collect that stuff from you, make sure it's properly disposed of, and then sent to archives or whatever needs to happen to it. But on the other hand, you may say, well, I'm not done with that. I need to read that more than once. I need to hang on to it for a little bit. I need to digest it so I can properly incorporate it into my thinking and my decision making. And so I could understand, and I think we've got an understanding of those two competing dynamics. So, with that framing, when you were vice president and you received classified documents that you wanted to hang on to for a bit, it wasn't just a read it once and send it on type thing. You wanted to hang on to it for a little longer. How would you? How did you handle that? How did you store those materials and how did it eventually get returned to where it needed to go? President Biden, look, first of all, the binders you talk about were binders that were for the presidential daily brief. It was a blue bag that has a lock on it that comes over. It has a computer in it and it has a laptop kind of deal or laptop kind of deal. And it has a binder with all the most important. I could show you one today, but of the events of the day. So it'd be tab 1, 2, 3, 4, and it will have a listing of what they are. Almost everything, with minimal exceptions, in that is classified. And so I would sit there and either read that with other personnel. We have a what they call a PDB, Presidential Daily Briefing, which I would attend, or I would be reading it myself. And when I took notes, I would take notes on the paper most of the time to remind myself what I wanted to follow up on. And then I'd sit with my national security team and say, we should follow up on this, find out more about whether or not, who killed Cock Robin, and find out whatever that is. And so the Bidens, and so the binders like this that I received, a binder would be handled this way. I don't recall getting a whole lot of those binders, and like something like you're handing me today, it would be the presidential daily brief that would have it. But lots of times what I get is I get briefed from my national security advisor. I get briefed by my whoever was handling various aspects of foreign policy for me. And that's how they'd come in and they'd have you, 5 papers in their hand. And they say, here's a copy for you. Let's go over what you're doing here. That was the way. I got very little material that had on the front of it, classified with the yellow the red boundary on it or the blue one, whatever. I got very little of that other than through the PDB that I recall. Anything that had that on it, what I would do when I finished it, I'd leave it on the desk and they'd collect it, take it in. And I'm trying to, does that answer your question, Mr. It's very helpful. I have a follow-on question. President Biden, sure. Mr. Her, which is, so let's focus on the PDB materials, which like you said, had an electronic component to it, like President Biden. Yeah, I never used that one. Mr. Her, okay, but there were also paper, hard copy, President Biden, it was a binder. Mr. Her, a binder. President Biden, a binder. Mr. Her, a bind or PDB binder. Okay, so let's say you're reviewing the PDB binder and you think of yourself or think to yourself, this stuff right here, this part of the PDB binder, that's important and I want to think about that some more. I want to read it again. I want to talk to my members of my own national security staff about it. And I'm not ready for that to get whisked away and taken off my desk. President Biden, I don't ever recall that happening. It may have, but usually what I do, I'd write down on a note card, follow up with Jake on bang, follow up with boom on boom. And then I'd call my team in and say, what do you think this means? That so and so move forces here or there, or so and so said such and such, and follow on that. And I'd ask, can you do me a memo on that? And they go back and anyway, Mr. Hurt, okay, understood. Do you recall any instances in which, you know, say the PDB binder had tabs 1 through 5 on it, 1 through 10 or something, where you would actually remove something and say, to make my conversation with my national security staff, my team easier, I'm going to say, pull this out. President Biden, I don't recall doing that. Mr. Hurt, and then I'm going to say, hey guys, I need to follow up on this. President Biden, I don't recall that. Mr. Hurt, okay. President Biden, taking anything out of the PDB binder, what I would do is I'd say, I'm keeping this binder till this afternoon and I want to talk to you about this. Come back in and take a look at it with me. But I don't ever recall taking pieces of the binder out. Okay, I'm going to stop here. I'll keep recording probably tomorrow or something, but it'll be with this section on Mr. Her, page 21. There's a lot of reading. But anyway, a lot of these are a lot of reading, but it's just kind of fascinating to see what was going on in these situations and actually how boring the conversation is. But anyway, oh, we'll talk to y'all later. Have a good day. Bye.